Welcome to the Moser on Manufacturing podcast, brought to you by Jacket Media Co. And now, your host, Harry Moser.
Good morning, everyone. Lou Weiss from Manufacturing Talk Radio and our friend and associate, Harry Moser. We're co-hosting our two shows, Moser on Manufacturing and Manufacturing Talk Radio. Good morning, Harry. Welcome aboard.
Great to be here, Lou. It's always good to see your happy, smiling face.
Even on a Saturday morning, huh?
Sure, especially on a Saturday morning.
Harry is the originator, co-founder of Reshoring Initiative, and he's been playing the initiative game now for what, 12 years?
12, yes.
Okay, Harry, give our audience a little bit of a background, how you got to do that and so on, and we'll get right into the hot topics.
We got to do it. I had been the president of AGI Charme. It's now GF Machining Solutions, and I retired in 2010, and so I got to do it because I didn't have a job, and I could have gotten. I had offers for other jobs, but this was clearly more important. You know, I instead of going out and making more money and paying more taxes, it was more important to do something good for the country that had been so good to my family, my father, grandfather, me. You know, we'd all benefited from this great country, and somebody needed to bring the strength back to U.S. manufacturing. So I said, well, I guess that's what I'm going to do with the rest of my career, and it's worked. I've been delighted with the results.
Excellent. The results are great, and you're well known throughout the country as the expert on this. So why don't we get to our first points that we wanted to discuss today, and that's when you did start this 12 years ago. I don't even know if the word reshoring existed. Do you have credit for that name?
No, not quite. At that, people were talking about onshoring, reshoring, repatriation was also a popular term. Right. And the only thing I can take absolute credit for was removing the hyphen from reshore. At that time, reshore always had a hyphen in it. And I said, if it's going to be serious, if it's going to look like it's here to stay, it can't have a hyphen. Hyphen is a couple of make-believe kind of things, you know? So I pulled the hyphen out, and within a year, nobody else was using a hyphen. And so that's what I did.
I'm sure that Oxford Dictionary really sends you many accolades for that correction.
Yeah, but it was okay. It was difficult in the beginning when I started off. It was easy to get polite interest because everybody knew it was a good idea, you know, a good theory, but a nice thing to have, so to speak. So we got good wishes, polite interest, but it was very hard to get belief and commitment. Very hard to get people to believe it would happen. So I had a lot of discussions with noted, you know, competent economists and so on about whether we had a flow or a trickle or a drop kind of thing. And part of the reason was we had two different perspectives. They looked at it from an absolute perspective, that the number of jobs at that time coming back per year were maybe equal to 0.1% of total manufacturing employment. So it's tiny, okay? Yeah. Whereas I saw it relatively that every year or two, the number of jobs coming back in a year was doubling. You know, so I saw this huge surge going on, but they saw that surge still only being tiny relative to the macro size of the economy. But the nice thing is that now that absolute trend has gotten big enough so the naysayers are gone. I mean, almost all of them. There's still some people will say it's not going to really come to much, but most everybody now recognizes that it is a significant impact on the economy.
Well, it doesn't come without problems, though. Our working force in the United States is diminishing. There are those who are still participating in the Great Resignation. The supply chain issue. We have lots of jobs. We have lots of jobs, and we have not as many people willing, capable, competent, and all of that stuff to take over these jobs. And now we've brought back 800,000 jobs, to your credit, over the last 12 years. So we were at 3 million short in manufacturing. Now we're 4 million short.
Well, no, I'll correct that. We never were 3 million. Let's say we had declined by 5 million or so because
Right.
of the offshoring. So we lost 3, 4, 5 million jobs to offshore, and
Right.
now at various times in the last 10 years, Deloitte and the Manufacturing Institute would report that the government would say that we're 600,000, 800,000 job openings in manufacturing, and Deloitte and Manufacturing Institute would project that in 10 years we're going to be 2 million short, or some number like that, huh? Which never seems to quite happen. And so if we had not, if the 800,000 had not come back, then instead of having 800,000 job openings now, in principle, we'd have 0 job openings now. Okay, and in some
Right.
ways, it's better to have some job openings because it makes it clear that manufacturing is a good career, and there's people out there wanting to hire you if you go into it. So it's not all bad. I also think that the job openings count is overstated. Now,
Doesn't surprise me.
yeah, there's a severe problem with shortages, no question. But if say there's a machine, say you and another machine shop in town both make similar products, and both of you know that there's a job out there that if you had one more person, you could take that job and make those products. So both of you will report that you have a shortage of one person, because if you can find one person, you'd hire them. But there's only enough work out there for one, not for two. Okay, so I do think that there's a modest overstatement of the job openings.
Mm-hmm. What got the reshoring trend going? When it finally got past the little steps, how did you get it to? I mean, did you panic people that we're not going to have enough work, enough jobs, enough product? We're paying too much overseas and not enough here.
Well, our job was to document. We document, we promote, like we're doing today. We enable, and we advocate for a leveler playing field. But in terms of documenting, we saw the trend happening, and in the beginning, from say 2010 to 2019, the driving force was corporations recognizing, I'll call them, the routine costs and risks of offshoring. That even when things were running smoothly, when there wasn't all this disruption going on, there were still duty, freight, let's say 2-month inventories to get things here, or 2-month deliveries to get things here from, say, China or India, travel costs, intellectual property risk. Those things have been present forever. Companies ignored them in the beginning, and then they started to recognize them over some period of time. And that what we call the total cost of ownership, all these routine things. As an example of that, I've got a friend who's a professor at the Ohio State University, Professor John Gray, and he's interested in reshoring. And he did a study maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and he found 4 companies that had offshored and then reshored. And he went and visited them, did a academic study kind of thing. And he said, well, why did you offshore? Well, the wages, the costs were so much lower, we couldn't afford not to. So we offshored. And he said, well, then a couple of years later, why did you reshore? Because over that couple of years, we had so many problems of travel, of late deliveries, of too much inventory, not enough inventory, intellectual property risk, misunderstandings, late night telephone calls that we said we were not saving enough to make it worth all that hassle. Okay?
Not
So,
even to mention the quality of product.
and the quality of product, and sometimes, I mean, like with an Apple iPhone, the quality of product's darn good. So there's variation, there's variation in quality. Some companies over there make a good product, and some obviously do not. So in addition to all that going on over that 10-year period, there was a trend in Chinese wages. So I'm trying to pull up a slide. Does that come up?
Not yet.
Not yet. So let's see. Here we go.
There we
How
go.
about that? Okay. So during that,
Yep, it's up.
okay. So during that time period, Chinese wages rose an average of 10 to 15% per year, starting with 2000 and going till 2020. So this chart shows unit labor costs. So the cost in US dollars to make a typical part. And so whatever that was for a range of countries, you can see the countries listed up here, whatever that was, for each one, call it 100. And then each year going forward, adjust it for the wage rate change in their local currency, for the change in the currency relative to the dollar, the exchange rate, and for change in productivity in the country. And you can see here's US stays flat, roughly 2% wage increases, roughly, 1% productivity, so not much change. The other countries bounce all around with currency. Here's China. So the labor cost per making a thing, the labor content of a manufactured product in China is now 5 times what it was 20 years ago, and everybody else has stayed roughly constant. And so and therefore, where China, you almost didn't bother to count the labor costs back when they were making 50 cents an hour. Now they're making $7 an hour, $7 an hour, and going up. And so even before the trade war, even before COVID, work was coming out of China because China was increasingly expensive, but the work significantly went to Vietnam, Cambodia, places like that, and Mexico, maybe 15% to the US. But now with all the disruption and all the risks that have come on, companies are starting to say, well, it looks like maybe we ought to bring more of it back here. So as we've had the disruptions like COVID, Suez Canal, the Ukraine, and increasingly the risk of Chinese decoupling. So I'm being interviewed actually this afternoon for an article on China decoupling. It's going to be in Voice of America, and there's an increasing perception that either we will stop buying, the government will say stop buying things there, or more likely the Chinese will say we're mad at you, we're not going to ship you anything, or there'll be a violence of some kind over Taiwan, and there'll be blockades, and nothing will be getting out of China, maybe nothing getting out of Asia, and nothing's going to be coming over. So I had a company call me 2 days ago, and they said, Harry, I need help sourcing product here in the United States. Now, where are you getting it now? China. Why are you thinking about bringing it back? Well, the tariffs, the Trump 25% tariffs. That's hard. The disruption. And just a worry that something's going to go wrong with Taiwan and China, and we're not going to be able to get the product. And if we can't get the product, we got to get it somewhere else. Let's start now. So I find increasingly that companies are looking for domestic solutions because of that risk and it's a long-term risk. It's not like it's going to go away in 2 months. It looks like China and the US are going to be significant adversaries for decades.
Without a doubt. Do you feel that the Trump tariff against all these countries, which actually is a penalty to the Americans who buy overseas, do you feel as though that had a major impact on the reshoring?
I'd say it did not have an impact on the reshoring, a significant impact in the beginning, like whenever that was, 2, 3 years ago.
Yes.
Because companies didn't believe that it was going to last.
Right.
And I believe the Chinese supplier and their U.S. customer absorbed most of the 25%. I've read a study from the Economic Policy Institute that said that there was no perceptible increase in prices here in the U.S. when the tariffs went into effect. That they all got somehow absorbed. Various people took a piece of it, and nobody wanted to raise their prices because they didn't want to lose market share. So I think, and therefore, since they didn't raise their U.S. prices, there wasn't as much incentive to switch over to made in U.S. But people can only absorb 25% for so long,
Right.
and so I now the combination of that 25% plus the COVID plus the risk of decoupling, it's you might say it's all those pieces together that are sort of breaking the camel's back, so to speak. So I, I believe that since we have it in effect, since it's part of our negotiating position relative to China, that it would be a mistake to relax it now. President Biden's thinking of doing that just to look like he's doing something to get prices down, to ease inflation. I'd much rather have him eliminate the gas tax, because that has nothing to do with China, for example. It has nothing much to do with reshoring. So I think he should keep the tariff. Now, in contrast, there are tariffs on steel and aluminum. I can question, because in those cases we tariff the steel, but we do not tariff the parts made out of steel that are shipped into the country. So we wind up with, say, Chinese companies, Chinese machine shops being able to buy steel for 30% less than you can,
Right.
and that gives them a price advantage relative to you. So in the case of the steel tariffs, if we're going to have tariffs on steel, then we should also have tariffs on steel products, anything made out of steel, so as not to put U.S. machine shops at a disadvantage relative to offshore competitors.
I think also the excuse me, the reshoring of products and effectively penalizing American companies, because American companies are the ones who have to pay the tax, not China. So perhaps they could have done it a little bit differently by imposing tariffs the other way. The point to that is to something that you said a few moments ago. No one likes paying it, but a lot of people don't know you're paying it because they don't understand the tariff methods. So that's number one. Number two, I believe that the cost of goods in respect to tariffs have participated in the inflationary period that we're going through, partly. Not only that, obviously the tariff on steel was to protect the U.S. steel industry, which now has built more steel companies within the last 2-3 years than they have in years. And at the same time, because of commodity prices of iron ore, nickel, carbon steel, and so on a global basis, the U.S. steel prices have gone up significantly. There was an issue about 3 months ago with regards to the London Metal Exchange, took nickel off of the trading table because the price went from $20,000 a ton to $120,000 a ton in 3 months. So they took it off because, the speculators are out there, the gougers, the grifters, they're all out there waiting for these types of opportunities.
Well, I'm hoping that some of them bought at 120, and I suspect it's fallen off somewhat since. Most commodities have come down. So I hope the speculators got burned.
Some did.
Yeah.
By the way, Harry, bring back the screen, and then you can bring it back again when you have additional slide discussion.
Okay, I'll do that. Sure. There we go.
I like seeing the full size, Harry. So, what aside from the obvious impact of reshoring, what issues exist that were a surprise to reshoring that impact our economy? You got a couple of surprises in there?
Things that are things impacts of reshoring or things that impacted reshoring.
Yeah, the things that you didn't expect to have.
Okay. Okay. So, well, one thing that relates to that is the current emphasis on the environment, for example.
Right.
And so we talk a lot, everybody talks a lot now about ESG, environmental, social, and governance, that companies are supposed to be responsible citizens and sustainable and all that kind of business. And within that ESG, the environment portion is especially clear that when companies bring work back to the US, when they manufacture here instead of making it there and importing it here, they make a significant impact on the environment. So, for example, we did a study of an aluminum die casting and found that making it in China, shipping it here compared to just making it here, by doing it here, you reduce the environmental load by 25 to 50%. So just a major impact. And yet, when these big companies are thinking about how to be environmentally friendly, they're talking about putting solar panels on the roof and doing all kind of. Whereas the simplest thing they could do is bring the work back to the U.S. and that would help with the environment. It would help with jobs in the U.S. It would help with reducing the budget deficit in the U.S. and making our military stronger. So many good things that would happen that are in their interest. And so part of our job is to break into this ESG community and get them to ask companies not just how many solar panels did you put up, but where are you buying, where are you having the product made, and where are you selling it? And if you're doing them close to each other, like localization, you get a plus. Whereas if you're making it somewhere and shipping it halfway around the world, and especially if you're making it in the places that have the dirty electricity like China, then you get a minus. And so that's our goal to get that done. Another question that's motivating people these days is that they're thinking about just-in-time inventory. How it used to be everybody wanted to get the inventory down to here, and now with the disruptions, the tendency is to come back up, have more inventory, and so we say that the answer is not to go back to big inventory, because the only reason you're thinking that you need to do that is because you have 5,000-mile supply chains that get disrupted all the time. Whereas if you had 50 or 100-mile supply chains, then you can get away with a lot less inventory, because if somebody needs something from you, Lou, and they call and say, hey, Lou, I just need some of those parts a week from now or 2 weeks from now, you're going to get them to them. Whereas almost always, if they call China and you got some big heavy thing that has to come by ocean freight, well, I can get it out of the factory in 2 weeks, but it's going to take 3 months to get there. so you got to keep a lot of it on the shelf. Right? So there's a lot that a lot of the trends like environment, there's social responsibility. China, fussing around, the fighting over there or risk of fighting. All these things are definitely strengthening the reshoring trend.
So here we are now, and 12 years later, 2022. I personally, for my other company, All Metals and Forge Group, we're seeing a significant increase in our business. We've seen some record months. We've seen that things have actually gotten better than what it was prior to COVID, at least in our story. And I'm hearing other stories like that from friendly competitors and vendors and so on. So is that what's happening here? Is what's happening in 2022 and going forward?
In terms of the economy, manufacturing in general, or specifically reshoring?
Well, as it relates to both.
Okay. So
That was a
manufacturing.
convoluted question, but
Okay. So manufacturing is clearly very strong, has been very strong. You know, the ISM numbers consistently stay above 50, so been a very good time for manufacturing. Shortages of skilled workforce. So I'm wearing my manufacturing is cool T-shirt. You know, to emphasize.
you still won't send me one. I have to pay for it, huh?
Well, yeah, you have to report a case of reshoring to get one, and I
Oh,
told you about that earlier. So
okay.
it would look good under your yellow shirt, though.
Yes, it
Yellow,
would.
yellow jacket. It would look
Like
good.
a Superman.
Yeah. So not enough skilled workforce. Clearly, we need to get a lot more people being trained as tool makers, welders, forge operators, et cetera, et cetera. The uh, the amount of reshoring has been very uh, pleasing. So if we look at the uh, pulling that up again, you tell me when you can see it.
We're on.
Okay, and let me see if I can get that. So here's the trend in reshoring, which is the blue line, in FDI, foreign direct investment. So think General Motors and think Toyota. So back in 2010, the sum of the two was about 6,000 jobs, and in 2021, about 260,000 jobs between the trends, with reshoring. For a while, reshoring was less than foreign direct investment. Now it's twice as much because the companies are deciding that overseas actions are a little riskier than they looked before, and it makes sense to produce in their home country for their home country. So it's happening here. I'm sure it's happening in other countries around the world. They're taking care of mama, so to speak. So 2021 was, you can see clearly a record. So it was just a great year. The cumulative of the jobs actually brought back, actually by the time they hired them, as best we can estimate, is about 1 million, because we allow for a couple of years between the announcement and the actual, because some of these factories take 2-3 years to build. And so
Right.
that 1 million jobs that have been, we believe, actually hired represent about 8% of total US manufacturing employment, because US manufacturing is about 12 million. And so 8% of 12 million is about 1 million. So we believe that US manufacturing employment would be about 1 million less if this trend had not happened over the last 12 years.
Okay. What, as far as our listeners and customers are concerned, they're all busy building things and making things and selling things and getting paid for them and so on. What is it that the Mr. Joe, who has a company, what should they be doing to help participate in the idea of reshoring?
Yeah, it depends on what you might say, what group they're in. If they're uh, if they are OEMs, so General Motors, company that makes fans, someone who makes an end product that gets sold to be used by somebody, then they should be talking to the people in their company and saying, what are we importing, and especially what are we importing from China, and what are we importing that if we couldn't get them, we couldn't easily find a replacement. So nuts and bolts, probably pretty easy to find a replacement. Standard nuts and bolts, easy to find a replacement. But if it's a forged part, if it's a cast or a injection molded part, stamped part with heavy tooling, and if all of a sudden you can't get the product, say out of China, and you can't get the tooling out, how long is it going to take you to make new tooling, find somebody to make it, and especially at a time when 10,000 other companies in the U.S. are getting nothing out of China, and they're all looking for this, all calling Lou and saying, "Lou, I need parts, get parts for me." And this is, hey, it's too late. You should have called. You should have called 6 months ago when Harry and I were discussing this on the show.
It's funny, you were mentioning the various areas and sectors. There's one that I wanted to bring up because I think it's important, particularly as it relates to other industries, and that is about 3D printing. 3D printing has really become in its own just in a very short period of time. And actually, I just recently read an article about how does 3D printing going to affect the forging industry. And 3D printers, they can make some pretty big parts. Matter of fact, I think it's in Amsterdam that they built a bridge that went across a stream, not a river, but a stream, small bridge that was completely 3D printed.
Mm-hmm.
They had the bridge built in place within a month. It
Okay.
got washed away to a flood. A month later, the bridge was there, and it's going to be there for eons. So
Made out of metal or made out of
metal, but all the
metal,
parts
huh?
were
No.
3D printed. So you probably had about 4 guys sitting around drinking beers, making these parts, and then somebody went and put them together. So there are things in the future, even though this is in the present, things in the future that are going to impact certain segments of the manufacturing world, either positively or negatively. But you can ask any blacksmith from 1890, did he ever think that he would be out of a job? They had nothing but horses. What are they going to do?
Mm-hmm.
And now we have cars that drive themselves,
Yep.
and airplanes and trucks.
Yeah. So I've been amazed at how well 3D additive manufacturing, 3D printing is done. It's done amazingly well. It's just boomed. And my only concern is that for most products, like I look around my office now, I look at chairs and tables and computer and monitor and a glass and pens and cell phone, and I say, how much of that could be made additive? And the answer is almost nothing. That almost none of it has the additive can give you either the accuracy or the surface finish or the cost, assuming you're going to make thousands of something as opposed to one, or the complexity. So you take my cell phone, and there's so many, there's integrated circuits and diodes. You're not going to make those on additive, not today, maybe 100 years from now. So I think I'm amazed how well it's done, but it's not going to. I don't. Maybe I'm just been too long in conventional machining, but it doesn't seem for high production. It doesn't seem like it's going to replace it. And then the question is, what everybody talks about is, well, instead of making a lot of parts in China, making a million parts in China and shipping them all over the world, we'll have additive machines everywhere in the world, and we'll make one at a time when we need them. And that makes sense if you can get the accuracy and the surface finish and the complexity that you need. So I mean, a lot of people have written articles saying that reshoring will be enabled by additive manufacturing, and I've appealed to 5 or 10, at least 5 additive manufacturing equipment companies, and said, send me the cases of reshoring that have occurred using your equipment so I can write an article about it and declare success. And I never get anything. Just tiny little things here and there. So I'll once again appeal. If anybody has cases of reshoring happening enabled by additive, by 3D printing, let me know. I'll make you famous for having done it.
We'll aid you in that and try and get some case studies. Maybe we could even get someone on the show. So if anybody's listening to Harry's begging a moment ago, we can get you on the show, and we can have a jolly old time talking about the new fad that's come and been quite successful. Harry, do you have any parting words before we wrap up this section?
Yeah, 2022 looks like it's going to be another record year. Based on the first quarter, we think maybe we'll hit 400,000 this year, so up 50% from last year. A lot of good action by the government, these chip foundries, et cetera. Although I did see a newscast a couple of days ago where the CEO of Intel came on and said, if the CHIPS Act, that's the act in Congress to help subsidize these chip foundries, if that does not pass soon, then the $20 billion foundry that Intel is planning is at risk. So the government's got to get its act together and make this happen. I noticed positively, Lego just announced $1 billion factory with 1,760 jobs. This would be, I think, their first factory in the United States, because right now they're importing from Mexico, Europe, maybe China, what have you. So bringing toys back. I mean, if you can bring toys back, you can certainly bring forgings back, I would think. Okay. So things are looking very, very good. Yeah.
And we only have one potential headwind, starts with the letter R, and a potential recession, which will negatively impact everybody. But let's keep our fingers crossed that we don't see that for a couple of years. What's your thought?
I get newsletters and forecasts about it 3 or 4 times a day from different economists and financial people, and most of them believe that the soft landing by the Fed is almost impossible to happen, that they will overdo it, and because they have to overdo it to get credibility again, right. and that we will have the hard landing, we will have a recession. Most people say it will be mild and we'll be through it fairly quickly, 6 months, whatever, and we'll be out of it and things will be roaring ahead. A few of them think that because of the excessive government debt and other problems that we could be facing a worse than average recession. So I'm in the moderate recession in 2023. That's my best guess.
I would tend to agree with you, because during this period, money is being socked away. Savings from the man on the street, he's saved more money over the last 2 years than for years in advance. So I think I tend to agree with you that it's going to be mild and short-lived. So let's keep our fingers crossed on that. Harry, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure, and I look forward to our discussions. And for you, all of you that are out there listening to us, Harry, it's a new show for Harry on Moser, Moser on Manufacturing, and it's going to be a monthly show until I can get him into a weekly show. But then the Wall Street Journal and Washington Post and the Congress, the Senate, which, by the way, I know that you did appear before the Senate talking about reshoring, and we're going to be doing that show with you next month or sooner, and we'll see how much the government really respects your knowledge base. Harry, thanks a lot, and everybody tune into Manufacturing Talk Radio, where's WIM, Women in Manufacturing. We've got a couple of other new things that are coming up. Chris Keel, an economist, is doing a flagship report for Manufacturing Talk Radio. So every week we're on. It used to be once a week, and we would say we're never doing more than once a week. There are weeks that we do 5. So, and then I'm supposed to be also running a forged metal company. Harry, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you, everybody out there. Good to see you. Yep.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. For more information on this or our other podcasts, visit jacketmediaco.com.